Okay, so today we're doing the Partnering with Schools for Mental Health Leaders webinar series, and today's topic is Texas State of the State. This work, all of the work we do here at South-Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is funded through a grant from SAMHSA. Today's agenda, we're going to do a really brief overview again of the Technology Transfer Centers. We'll review some mental health statistics for children and how mental illness can affect school performance. We'll hear from the TEA agency's mental health leader about the TEA's priorities around school mental health. You'll be introduced to recent state legislation related to school mental health. You'll hear about Project Aware, which is a great example of a comprehensive school mental health system. You'll hear from policymakers at Texas Health and Human Services around guidance on partnering with schools. Then we'll have an opportunity for discussion, followed by just a quick survey. For those of you who want CEUs, you've got to take the survey, but we'd love everybody to do it. It's a very brief 4-question survey. And we'll also give you our contact information. Okay, so we are part of SAMHSA's Technology Transfer Center network. These Technology Transfer Centers offer regional training and technical assistance to organizations, and they're located across the United States, including Puerto Rico. So the purpose of these Technology Transfer Centers is to develop and strengthen the specialized behavioral healthcare and primary healthcare workforce around their work with substance use disorder and mental health disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery support services. The work we do is we help people and organizations incorporate effective practices or evidence-based practices into their work around substance use disorder and mental health disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery. We're really a research to practice model here. So here's a little visual of the TTC umbrella. What you should know from this visual is that you all have access to each of these centers within your region for training and technical assistance. The first being the Addiction Transfer Technology Center, the next one being us, the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, and the Prevention Technology Transfer Center. The icon on the right is for the SMI Advisor. That's a recent addition to the TTC team, and they provide direct clinical advice to providers who are working with clients with serious mental illness. Okay, so today's focus of this webinar is State of the State. What is the state of school mental health in Texas? And we have speakers joining us from the Health and Human Services Commission and TEA. Nova Evans is a senior policy analyst in the Office of Mental Health Coordination at HHSC. Julie Wayman is in charge of mental health and behavioral health at the Texas Education Agency. And Lillian Nguyen is the Director of Policy at the Office of Mental Health Coordination in HHSC. So our learning objectives today are to become familiar with the recent Texas legislation, understand TEA's leadership priorities, become aware of tools and resources available from TEA related to school mental health, to understand the core goals of TEA's Project Aware grant, and to understand HHSC's goals for collaboration between local mental health authorities and schools. All right, so here's Julie Wayman.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to have 20 participants here. This is great to be able to speak with the local mental health authorities and others in collaboration with our partners at the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center at UT, IEMH, and HHSC. We work together to help promote mental health for students in schools. Up on the screen you have before you something that TEA always wants us to start with whenever we discuss mental health in students, which is the data and the statistics, which drives the why behind what we're doing. And those statistics you can see, and the concern that we have, all of us together, our shared concern and our seeking of shared impact to correct some of these situations is that, a fifth of our students in high school live with a mental health condition. One of the big concerns is that currently it's taking us on the average of 8 to 10 years in order to identify students who are having mental health troubles. And this allows the onset and the symptoms to increase while we are not intervening. And so this knowledge of understanding that we need to become more aware is driving a lot of the work so that we can intervene earlier. We've also discovered that 50% of our students in high school who drop out of school who have a mental illness are dropping out of school. So that again would drive us regarding our education outcomes that we're seeking for students and why mental health is so important to address. In addition, as many of you on the phone know some of these statistics, it's also important to review them and keep them top of mind. We always have been informed by this YRBS survey that's been given by the CDC and the Department of State Health Services over many years in our schools. One thing we've noticed is that trends have been trending up for a period of about 10 years regarding increased suicide ideology among the students. When you have almost 18% of students seriously thinking about and considering suicide, this becomes a concern for our state as a whole, for all the partners and the adults working together to intervene for students. We tell teachers, when you think about a class and you look at your class of about 25 students, most likely one of those students, 4.5% of them, have made an attempt so severe in the past 12 months that they are required to receive medical intervention. So this knowledge of the problem helps drive our interventions. Am I moving the slides?
Yes.
I lost my slide mover. Here it is. One thing that's important that underpins our work as the frame starts to change is changing our perspectives regarding grief and trauma and the impact that it has on mental health and on student behavior at school and on students in school. And you have a picture right there of the student, with their head down. And if we were having an open conversation, we would wonder what different people would see from that picture, and different people see different things with the student. Is the student just bored? Is the student lazy? Is the student tired? Did he not sleep last night? Did something happen in the home? Did the student have a loss? We just don't know what's happening with the student. And often we make many assumptions in schools and in education and in life and judgments. And one thing we want to do in being trauma-informed is to have a trauma-informed inquiry mind, where we think about and we wonder about what happened to the student, rather what's wrong with the student. And sometimes when we change our thinking, it can change our behavior and our subsequent interaction with the student to be more trauma-informed in our reactions and interrelationships with our students. There's many theories, of course, that underpin our work in mental health. One thing that we just want to bring top of mind to everyone is the adverse childhood experiences framework and theory. And because we know that this has been researched, and we know that this is something that our legislature is concerned about and that we're concerned about increasing awareness of, we teach this to schools, and we want to make sure that people understand that our students are coming to us from many different circumstances and environments and bring many issues with them into the school building that impact education. The Adverse Childhood Experience Study, commonly called ACEs, was done as a review. I'll share with you. It was done in the 1990s, right, by Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, where it was a review of health outcomes that folks had: disease, disability, and social problems leading to early death. And as they looked at the study participants, they did an interrelationship or a correlation between adverse childhood experiences, or the things that happen in the person's life when they're older that happened to them when they were younger, and made a correlation between the progression of disability and disease and increased health risk. And over time, more studies have been done. As you can see on our drawing from education, we have a staircase there, and we have bulleted out the core 10 things that were originally looked at in the original ACE study, when they were making correlations between adopting risky behaviors, disease, disability, and social problems, and early death. And the correlation was the more of these factors of parental separation or divorce, parent incarceration, domestic violence in the home, or substance abuse in the home, mental illness in the home, and of course, all the forms of child abuse and neglect. The more of those they had, there was a graded impact in terms of the health risks that they would receive later. And we found that to be true with students today regarding mental health and adoption of risky behaviors. Often there's a cumulative impact, so they call that an ACE score. The more things that maybe happen to you, the more trauma that you might have experienced, the more that it may impact your development. And so we don't advocate giving an ACE score in schools, but we broadly advocate understanding that trauma and things that students bring to the table, to the school building, underlie what's happening with them, the decisions that they make. And we understand that on staircase 1 is when these things happen to us, it disrupts neural development. And that's one of the most important things in education, right? And there's not a lot we can do about that for the early years, pre-3, pre-K, but there is an opportunity for education to intervene when students are in school regarding social and emotional and cognitive skills before these get impaired. So we can do skill building in these areas of social, emotional, and cognitive competencies that can help mitigate against and prevent an escalation up the staircase of adoption of risky behaviors and increased health risks, disease, disability, and social problems, and even early death. So we want to understand and realize that the science has told us through replicated studies over and over that we can intervene and we can help build resilience, protective factors, and build these social and emotional competencies for our students to mitigate against some of the unhealthy behaviors that we might see in school. To let you know, the research has shown, as a summary here, the potential impact of trauma on learning. And I say potential because it's never 100%. One thing that's important to understand is that everyone has different reactions to trauma and grief. So we never want to assume anybody or do any kind of diagnosing to assume that anybody has any of these disabilities or these cognitive skill deficits, but to be aware that ACEs and trauma can contribute to attention deficits, concentration problems, memory problems, recall, processing, reasoning. And if you've done some brain research, you understand that, how trauma affects the brain. Also competencies with, and we all know that we need these competencies in life, but certainly we need them in school as well. So the self-efficacy and confidence that you need to be able to persist and work through your credits, through your schoolwork, even through early reading and math challenges. The attachment and relationships, the research is clear that belonging and relationships are profound and that students need those as a base in school. And trauma can affect how students are able to attach and build relationships. And so on with social integration, that obviously would lead to some adjustment in school problems, managing emotions. Behavior self-regulation is obviously a big concern with teachers and schools and classrooms. And of course, making responsible decision-making as it impacts those healthy and risky behaviors and other things like doing your homework, staying on track, staying on task, participating in your lessons and in your study and in your learning. And so I'm going to just kind of show you this picture with child trauma and considering changing the frame. We really, when we work with schools, we really double down on helping them understand and that students who are struggling with trauma are basically internally concerned for their safety. If you don't feel safe at home and then you come to school and don't feel safe, or because you don't feel safe in general as a person because of the brain deficits that maybe you've got to rebuild some of those neural pathways that have been destroyed with some of your ACEs factors that have hit you in your life, you're worried about your own safety. So they operate on this high level of arousal and fear, which can become unpredictable and confusing to the student as much as to the teacher who's interacting with the student. So if students discern correctly or incorrectly that they're going to have an exposed or increased danger, their fright and flight and fight symptoms come up, and those might surface. And that anxiety, hostility, maybe aggressiveness, maybe even withdrawal completely. It can come out in different ways. And so teachers being aware to be able to take a breath and then be able to help with redirection and de-escalation techniques are a very important strategy that we need to work with as we understand the impacts of child trauma and change our thinking. And so in schools, we really want to work with, in terms of other ways to look at it. The legislature also is asked us to talk about youth development and a trauma-informed approach for building resilience and well-being in youth development, which has to do with thinking about reducing and mitigating against the risk factors. So things like making social and emotional learning available for all, and in creating positive school climates and measuring that climate actually, and getting some feedback how we're doing, putting in positive behavior supports for all. And those kind of things help reduce and mitigate against these risk factors, as do the work that you all do, for example, in mental health first aid training. We want to train across universities so people are aware. We want suicide prevention training for all, and we need that trauma-informed care training so that teachers know how and the schools know how to be able to interact with people in a calm and sensitive way. And also to increase promotive and protective factors. You know, when students are at school, we need to make sure that they all have a relationship with a caring adult. Good mentoring programs have done that. Good teachers do that. We need to make sure that we have interventions available for students who have higher risks, that we can double down on those social emotional skills, maybe in small groups with learning those skills like coping skills and strategies, managing emotions, skill building is something that we definitely can do in education. And I also want to say parent engagement and supports. Parents need to understand mental health first aid. Parents need to understand what we're dealing with and what their students are going through as they grow and develop. And of course, promotive and protective factors are making sure they have access to mental health professionals, social workers, counselors, other caring adults that can help direct them and provide the interventions and treatment that they might need, and more social and emotional development opportunities, positive youth development, after school programs, and more. So all of this together helps reduce or mitigate against these risk factors and increase our protective factors. The theory and the research shows that that leads to increased resilience, mental health, and healthy development and well-being. So we do this throughout our communities is what we would hope to community build toward. But in the school community, we would hope to build toward this trauma-informed approach within our schools. Examples of student outcomes are something that's important to us in education. Everything that we do, we measure. If we can't measure it, we can't hardly justify doing it. We spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of effort, and we spend a lot of money. And so we want to make sure that our energy is put and placed into strategies and interventions that are working, and that means we have to measure it, whether it's working or it's not working, and make adjustments. And when we implement best practices, we need to make sure that we're implementing them with fidelity. So for example, Austin Independent School District has a research department. They're a blessed district, many don't. But we will be continuing to work with districts on measuring their outcomes. And as you can see, AISD, since they've been implementing social emotional learning, are finding increases in the right places with the reading and the math skills. Students reading by the third grade is very, very key. We know that already. That's even key to their social and emotional well-being later in life. So in schools, it's important that we have early intervention for our youngest students. And then we want to decrease those discipline referrals, right? We want to teach teachers and schools and counselors and mental health professionals to work together and collaborate, to be able to increase instructional minutes for students, keep them in the classroom, keep them engaged, and keep them in school. And a 45% decrease is pretty profound in discipline referrals when social emotional learning strategies are implemented. And then measuring that school climate and connectedness, I mentioned that earlier. We really need to know, how are our students perceiving our school in terms of the climate and the connectedness? How do our teachers perceive it? How about our parents? So we really do advocate and hope that schools will measure their school climate and use it as data, and so that we can continue to improve on that continuous quality improvement trajectory that we're all on together in our journey. And then AISD is also implementing the school-based mental health centers. Many of your local mental health authorities are having school mental health professionals placed in schools, whether in health centers or mental health centers in schools, and collaborating, and AISD is already finding preliminary data. They'll be continuing to release more data, but better STAR performance on those key academic measures, fewer aggressive behavioral offenses at school, and fewer suspensions, and they are comparing that to a comparison group. So when we look at this data, that helps us to be able to show other districts that this is doable when we put these kinds of strategies in place and we partner in this way in schools. I just want to make sure to share out with all of you that TEA works with the Health and Human Services Commission to address statutory requirements in our state laws and our health and safety code and in our education law, so that we can share best practices to promote mental health and behavioral health to our schools. We, every year, update a best practice list. It's on the TEA website. This has only been going for a few years, and we're making continual improvements with it in partnership with the Office of Mental Health Coordination and Children's Mental Health Unit and Substance Abuse Unit. We're in this process now with updating the list again. This list is important. It feeds into educator preparation to help our teachers who are learning to be educators at the universities right now. They use this information to help train their teachers. Our teachers go back and get continuing education, as do our principals, our administrators, our counselors. And also, these best practice strategies are to be integrated into the district needs assessment and their plan for suicide prevention. Here I just show you a list of some of the factors, topic areas that we have on our best practices webpage. These are mostly curated mental health resources. This year we're also beginning and working with the Texas Mental Health Transfer Center and UTIEMH. We're working to build additional resources for this page that list out some strategies and even some more research. But they fall under all of these topics. So all of the resources that we've curated, that we're developing, white papers and so forth, will all be located under these categories on our TEA webpage. And we promote that out to be also shared out through the educational service centers. In education, we have 20 education service centers. And I know many of you are partnering with the education service centers. So this is where we can share resources. If you have resources to share with us, you would like to suggest that you don't see on the best practices web pages. We've curated most of this from SAMHSA, from suicide prevention best practices registry, from registries. They all have to have evidence behind them or promising practice research. If you have anything like that that you see missing when you review this webpage, feel free to send it to Lillian at HHSC, to myself, and we have a team that will be reviewing these against a rubric to add to our web pages. Just want to share with you quickly our TEA primary projects that we're working on now. We've assembled a work group, and they have created already drafts for a mental health ecosystem network toolkit. What does that all mean? That means we are going to provide tools and guidance for districts on how to map and identify their community resources, how to assess their needs, and also against quality school mental health indicators as they strive and are inspired to set up a quality comprehensive school mental health. We want to facilitate helping people to get into the frame of mind and the strategies on how to develop good, strong community partnerships supported by written agreements, and how to develop a campus plan for mental health prevention, supports, and intensive services within a multi-tiered system of support. And I'll explain that in just a little bit. I need to move a little quicker, I think. And also our second toolkit that we are working on, finalizing now, we'll be going into some design, is early identification of mental health needs. This is the student level work, while the ecosystem networks is kind of systems level work and resources. This is around how to identify student needs. We are compiling some mental health screeners, teaching about screening around behaviors and internalizing and externalizing factors in the classroom, and then be able to compile that data where counselors and mental health professionals can do additional gated screening where we can make appropriate referrals to all of you in a systemic way. So we're going to help people to do that. Make sure schools have tools for parent engagement, including those HIPAA and FERPA compliant consents and notifications, sample forms, referrals, student wellness plans, safety plans, and all the best practices that we can continue to generate regarding early identification for services and supports. I wanted to give you a little bit of just real briefly, I'm maybe running short on time, but so I'm going to talk about just some of our priorities through these bills. I'm not going to go into any of it. SB in detail, just some highlights. SB 11 is considered our school safety bill. In addition to the school safety committees and plans and audits, we are going to be building out some supports around the safe and supportive school program with teams. Remember I mentioned tiered interventions, threat assessments, data collection. We should be able to hopefully collect some more data on what schools are doing. Hopefully that help inform some of our mental health work, updating the best practices page, and more on suicide prevention training, strengthened requirements. Each school will be developing a trauma-informed care policy and training for their educators, which is really great. And we'll be collaborating with HHSC to develop a mental health resources rubric to send out to our education service centers to continue to identify resources. And in 2020, we'll be developing a state plan for school mental health that ensures access for all. I didn't mention there's also a mental health consortium with universities that will be building capacity for students who are at risk and assessing assessing mental health, telehealth, and other resources to provide to support you all and integrated care with physicians and so forth. So there's a lot going on in SB 11. At SB 18, I'll just tell you quickly, I like it that it adds more to the district improvement plans to include more strategies regarding positive behavior interventions and support, interventions for trauma. So you're going to see these things happening, more educator training, and I would say even more school policies that will support mental health. For example, district procedures for supporting students returning to school from treatment or a suicide attempt. Isn't that wonderful? So we'll be working together with HHSC as we develop these things and our posting of resources online. In addition, we will be developing together, collaboratively, guidance on assessing our community services and guiding principles for working together and collaborating that should help. And many of you may know HB 19 is going to place a mental health professional from the local mental health authorities in each ESC, which is really going to ramp up infrastructure, collaboration, knowledge and skills, serve as a resource for those school districts, increase the capacity for districts to access training in mental health first aid, trauma-informed practice through that mental health professional, and there'll be an agreement between these agencies, and so we're really looking forward to that. Oh, my darn arrow. I apologize. I just want to make sure you all understand this concept of multi-tiered systems of support. As I learn about the mental health authorities and systems such as CANS and levels of care that you assess student needs for, I would say kind of similarly, schools kind of work in that public health model of multi-tiered systems. And we will be promoting that through our special education department, through curriculum, through TEA. So you're going to hear more about this. We think of this in terms of promoting student health and safety and mental health, all of it together, as well as we do this for academics and education. And we're going to be integrating all of these together through these tiers. So tier 1 universal that all get, tier 2 targeted, those interventions that select students get, and tier 3 often where many of our mental health therapy is needed up at the top. So, but we think about mental health in schools as penetrating all 3 tiers from prevention all the way through intervention and treatment. Real quickly, Project Aware Texas is an example of what we have. We wrote a grant to SAMHSA, Advancing Wellness and Resilience in Education. It's a 5-year grant. We are super excited about it. We're in the planning year right now. We're finishing it up. And it is going to focus on those partnerships and collaborations between state and local systems. In this partnership is TEA, HHSC, and the UT office right there hosting this webinar. We are all working together in order to develop supports for 4 education service centers that were hit through the Hurricane Harvey a few years ago and have struggled with some trauma and mental health issues. So what we're going to be working on doing is setting up some comprehensive school mental health to increase that awareness of mental health issues, to provide training for the school mental health, in-school mental health for all the staff, and to connect those school-age youth who are having behavioral health issues to services. I'll just say real quickly the goals. I just look at the goals and that they'll be on your PowerPoint. But basically, we're increasing capacity and we're decreasing, hopefully, some of the disciplinary referrals. Again, we're remeasuring what we do. We're integrating systems of care principles, student and family voice into the process. So evidence-based practices are here that will be implementing these and more. And you can look further on roles and responsibilities when you want to look at the PowerPoint for additional information. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Michelle. So we heard from Julie a little bit about the partnership between the Texas Education Agency and the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. And these 2 agencies are providing the leadership for Project Aware along with the University of Texas at Austin. And in the partnership between TA and TA will be assisting it's mainly to service provision for students in schools, and so TA will be assisting in the referral process and how teachers and educators and school personnel will be referring students over to the local mental health authorities. And so TA will assist with the development of the referral process, while HHSC will provide guidance to the local mental health authorities on the provision of mental health services in students. So for Project Aware, the project director or coordinator will be at the Texas Education Agency. There will be a Project Aware co-coordinator at HHSC who will work very closely with the project coordinator at to provide ongoing technical assistance to the local education agencies or school districts and to the local mental health authorities. Then we will have this ongoing webinar series, and also TA and HHC will host conference calls and education sessions with the school districts and local mental health authorities. And so while TA and HHSC work together, they will be providing guidance on Project Aware to the school districts and to the local mental health authorities. And so in the partnership of the school districts and the LMHAs, then the school districts will be referring students to local mental health. The schools will complete mental health screenings for students, and these will be simple screenings, and if a student shows that they may have mental health symptoms or might benefit from mental health services, those are the students who will be referred to the local mental health authorities, and then the local mental health authorities will complete more comprehensive mental health assessments using the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths assessment. And so once the local mental health authorities complete those comprehensive mental health assessments, if a student meets clinical eligibility for mental health services via that assessment, then that student, with the consent of their family, will be enrolled in mental health services. At that point, the case manager or therapist at the local mental health authority will coordinate with the school to provide the mental health services in the school. So with the family's consent, the local mental health authority, case manager, therapist, skill trainer, or facilitate mental health services in the school environment during the school day. And this will be done in order to increase accessibility to mental health services for students and participation in those services. If the services are more convenient for children and families to access because they were located in the school and the families don't need to travel to the local mental health clinic, then the services will be more accessible, participation rates will be increased, and this will likely result in improved mental health symptoms as well as improved academic achievement. And then also I want to mention, similarly to how TA will have a coordinator and HHSC will have a coordinator, at the community level, there will be a community project coordinator housed at the Education Service Center, and they will oversee the collaboration between the school district and the local mental health authority to make sure that the referral process is working correctly and that students are being enrolled in services and that those services are being provided in the schools. To facilitate the partnership between the schools and the local mental health authorities, HHSC will provide guidance on the development of memorandums of understanding or other agreements that school districts and local mental health authorities can put in place to facilitate the provision of mental health services in schools as well as information exchange. Okay. Michelle, back to you.
Nova?
Oh, yes, you're on mute. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Julie and Lily, for doing an awesome job with your explanation. I think a lot of what I have to say is probably going to be a little repetitive. So, in fact, I think how do I get back? Can you move the slide form? Oh, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
I see it. I guess you already went over this. I was going to go over the roles and responsibilities of aware participants, but since Julie already talked about that, I think I'm going to skip over that. For now, what we wanted to do was we just wanted to take a moment for the local mental health authorities on the phone, and we wanted to open up a discussion, excuse me, on kind of your feedback, what's going on right now in terms of, wait, you're moving.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to unmute people, and every time I click something, it moves a slide.
And for as far as your partnerships with schools, do you have effective school mental health partnerships now? What are the challenges? What are your achievements? What are some opportunities that you see? We have kind of laid out what things are happening right now, and I think we'll talk about some things that we foresee in the future. But we really want to hear from you and provide a forum for some conversation, and also take back your thoughts and help us to provide future trainings and technical assistance that can be really useful. And also we will be doing webinars and talking to schools, because like Julie and Lillian were saying, that we're doing this on multiple levels. So we want to make sure that we're sharing this information with the schools, we're sharing it on a state level, and that's all being fed back and forth from a state to a local level as well. So the more information we could share, the more we can communicate together, the better the outcomes are going to be. So right now, we want to open up the opportunity to have kind of a conversation. So I guess if Michelle's going to unmute your phones, and hopefully we'll figure out how to not all talk at once if you have any questions. But I would like to hear from you all. How do you feel your role is right now in school mental health partnerships? And in terms of school-aged youth and educators, what are some of the behavioral health concerns you're seeing?
Okay, and real quickly, I just want to jump in and say everyone's unmuted. So if you want to ask a question, please go ahead. And if you don't want to ask a question, feel free to mute yourself again, especially if there's any noise in the background.
This is David Baker, Heart, Texas region. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I had some questions about it sounds like there's going to be a mandate for the schools to participate in services with the LMHA. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, this is Julie at DEA. No, there's not a mandate for that.
Okay.
No, but we're encouraging it, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's a difference kind of between, so what the legislation helps us inspire and what the research helps us inspire is that school and community partnerships are a positive thing to promote health, right? Address it. And so we want to kind of try to build, lay that foundation, kind of lay that expectation, give them like the resources and tools at schools to be able to help them understand how to identify you, help you to identify them. And some of the webinars that we're going to have might help us like how to work with schools. I think it's coming up, which I think will be a really good one. And so we can just try to build across cultures and across systems how to do that. David, you're at Heart of Texas. Are you doing any partnering with schools now?
We are. We have a school-based mental health program. We're in 10 districts. So I have dedicated staff in 10 of our local school districts throughout our region.
See, that is amazing. I'm going to want to learn more from you. And I think we were also trying to want to set up an environment where we could do more cross-learning like this, where you're doing those kinds of partnerships. 10 is significant. And we don't even have that mapped, right, around the state yet. And we want to do that. We want to celebrate that collaboration, inspire more of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have another question too, if I'm not cutting anybody else off, but how is the person from the LMHA who's going to be in the region service centers, how is that going to be funded?
Oh, I think that'll be managed probably through our executive leaderships who, kind of work to get that agreement brokered, and funding for that. Oh yeah, funding is for that. So that's not going to come out of your budget, is my understanding. And so, worry about that, no stress. So no, that's like a priority that got funded, or it's a real need because that's really going to help us to be able to build that capacity and that link. This is something that myself and HHSC had talked about way back last year, and I'm so thrilled to see this coming to pass because what that will give you is somebody there at the ESC to kind of help broker that relationship, do that training right out of the ESC, and reach out and try to collaborate and figure out more about how we can get students, schools, hooked up with services, public and private, and it's just going to build a lot of knowledge and skills for mental health crossbreeding. So, so don't worry about the funding is my understanding. I've seen the appropriations bill, so I think it's there.
David, this is Nova, and I'm wondering if your first question, when we just talked about the roles and responsibilities, those are specifically for the aware schools that are in the grant. So those aren't applicable to all schools, although, all the tools and stuff that Julie talked about that are being created are going to be available to any school who wants to utilize those. And if you want to follow the roadmaps and we're going to put all that up there. So we do want to encourage, like she said, more participation, but those are specifically for those grants.
Oh, okay, I might have missed that part earlier then.
But I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So any other comments on that, or how you're doing?
Hi, this is Molly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a quick plug that for those who want to hear more from David and his colleagues about some of the cool work they're doing, they are slated for a webinar on August 9th. So keep checking into the series for some of those examples of some of the incredible collaborations that are already happening in our state.
Awesome.
David, can I ask you, this is Julie again, are you collecting some data out of your centers? I talked a little bit about data. One of the best practices tells us that we should not be partnering with mental health and schools and then just having the mental health professional, quote unquote, I took this out of some research. In the corner, in an office, disconnected, from schools and teachers, and, and data and sharing. So I just wonder, are you collecting some data? I know you're going to have a session, but are you?
We are. We are doing that as we have a Closing the Gaps grant. That's what we've called it, but it's a SAMHSA funded grant. And so we are collecting data through the NOMS. And then also we're collecting data on attendance, grades, and behavior or disciplinary reports.
Awesome.
And, yes. So one of the challenges has, yes, ma'am. The biggest challenge to that has been each school and each school district collects that data for themselves in a little different way.
Yeah.
And so, but we have had the cooperation of those 10 school districts in doing that as well.
Well, that's good, because what I hear is that's kind of within the multi-tiered system of support, your person being part of the team. It's a little different in every school, which you've seen one school, you've seen, school. And so that's really great. They're part of the team and doing that data work. I can't wait for your webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to talk about some of the challenges they've been having partnering with schools, or some achievements?
Anyone else on the webinar partnering with schools in some way?
This is David again. I'm willing to jump in if needed, but
Sure. I guess the other question is, do you see any opportunities, especially, with the things that Julie has mentioned, with the new legislation, with the all the tools that we are collaborating on, and kind of going into the next year, are there new opportunities that you see, and also based on, recent, maybe new relationships? I know quite a few local mental health authorities have formed relationships with schools over the past 2 years, and we've been hearing a lot of good things. So I'm wondering if there's other folks on the phone that might have some thoughts about that. And if not, I mean, the other thing is, what do you think, is there anyone that can tell us what you think that the state could help provide that might facilitate collaboration on a local level?
this is David. I think a mandate that they have to cooperate would be great. Mm-hmm. But,
so David, it's been difficult with the kind of the cooperation.
Yes, and I know I'll have a full opportunity later on, but it seems that at least in the local districts that we're in, the principals on each campus have quite a bit of latitude, mm-hmm. and power to run their campuses as they see fit, and which sounds great for the empowerment of a principal. However, it doesn't always feel like the buy-in is there throughout a district.
And I know we only have a few minutes, and I'm sure you're probably going to get to this on yours, but can you talk a little bit about, like, specifically why some of the principals are not buying in?
I wonder, I think it can go both ways. I think it could be from the top down or from principals up. And then, so as district wide, not understanding the collective impact, that positive collective impact that we can have being on those campuses. And then sometimes I think it also, there's, of course, the focus on academics. And so maybe not understanding how having a healthy social emotional connection can lead to that positive academic success. Mm-hmm. Just thinking about kids being pulled out of class, or actually how we're working together versus just somebody else trying to get on their campus and pull kids.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, and we all look forward to that webinar, and I want to hear more. So that's really great. I think we have a few more slides and only a few more minutes. So Michelle, do you want to move through?
Sure will. Thank you, Nova. Thank you, Julie and Lily. Okay.
Welcome.
All right, so here are the next webinars in our Partnering with Schools series, and we hope that you'll join us for each of them. You've received calendar invites for each of them, and we're working on getting CEUs attached to each. So the next one's on understanding school culture on July 12th.